So the first thing that I'm reviewing from my list of 23 things that I'm super excited for out of 2023 is The Last of Us TV show that HBO is producing. It airs on Crave in Canada, which is where I am based, and HBO and Crave shot me out the entire season for a look at all of the episodes and to come back and give you a non-spoilery review of The Last of Us TV show as it's about to premiere. And I think what you guys are probably wondering is this worth the journey? Is this a show that you should sign up for and watch on a week-to-week basis? Because that's how they're going to be doled out every Sunday night for the next 9 weeks. You're going to get a new episode of The Last of Us. I'm going to get to that in just a second, but I think what is really intriguing about this show is that it was made in partnership and under the tutelage and guidance of the co-creator of The Last of Us. Neil Druckmann is a director on the show, he's a producer on the show, and he worked hand in hand with the showrunner, who is Craig Mazin, who worked on Chernobyl for HBO. So the pedigree is absolutely huge, and the authenticity is something that everybody truly aspired to do. I can tell you that the premiere episode 1, is out freaking standing. The hairs on the back of your neck will stand up. It is just pitch perfect in terms of tone and style. It introduces all of the brutal stuff that Joel goes through at the beginning of the game, and in a really beautiful cinematic interpretation. And of course, he meets up with Ellie, and we get into it in the first episode, but also the scope and scale of the series and what the filmmakers could do with HBO's backing is also exemplified in that first episode. We really see what has transpired in the cities that Joel and Ellie have to deal with across this series, but also in other parts of the world. There's also a lot of historical flashbacks and going back in time to try to understand the motivations of these characters. And I have to say that that is the most exciting thing about this series, because yes, it follows the overall plot details and the direction of the game. So if you've played the Last of Us video game, this one's focusing on part 1, so the first Last of Us game, which came out originally in 2013. And you guys can recall that we were all talking about the fact that this is already like a movie. We're playing a movie. Why isn't this a TV show or a movie? We were saying that 10 years ago. I actually pitched Naughty Dog. I said, why don't you take these PS3 visuals and make a show out of that? I think this is so photoreal and compelling as it is, people would watch that. But here we are. We've got a live action show. What's interesting is the detours and the different kinds of ideas and the adaptation risks that Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin and all of the collaborators that put this series together have taken. And it makes the experience of watching these episodes, going from episode to episode, really thrilling, because you don't know how things are going to change up. And it's not massive. It doesn't change the whole scope of the narrative. It doesn't make it a different story. It just is like this parallel track running along what we recognize from the video game. And I think it was done so that it would keep us on our toes as viewers that have played this before, but also to attract people that have no understanding or inclination to ever play the video game. What is true as you watch this series is that it strengthens and illuminates a lot of the questions that you might have from the characters that you know in the game, adds a little context and backstory, which is really quite wonderful, and it also strengthens the work that's in the game. Just like the game reciprocates and says, okay, this story is big enough to transfer across media and be adapted and be changed and be iterated on in such significant ways that it's going to matter. It's really going to register and hit. And that is absolutely exemplified by the first episode. And as we go on other tangents and detours, and we see characters that we know from the game, and they're having some real moments in the show, like some real lengthy time. This is much more a show of sort of the total impact of this infection that is spread around the world. It's not just Joel and Ellie, and we're just following from Joel's perspective like we do in the video game. And in some ways that makes the show resonate in some really beautiful, wonderful ways. And in some ways you kind of miss that sort of Joel forward experience that you get while playing the game. This is not Joel as superhero. He's not going to take on 20 different characters at a time and just brutally kill everybody over and over and over again like you do in the video game. Everything's a lot more measured, a lot more truthful, realistic. Pedro Pascal plays Joel perfectly, and he's a 56-year-old man through most of the show, and he deals with his body kind of falling apart on him, and he's got real pain, and he's carrying the weight of the choices that he's made all the way through. He's broken broken. He's totally beat down. And of course, we know, if you're familiar at all with the story of The Last of Us, is that he's really transformed by this relationship that he builds with Ellie, who is this precocious 14-year-old girl played by Bella Ramsey. And they're both great. Bella Ramsey, I think, has a little bit of a tougher slog with this because she's an abrasive, precocious 14-year-old kid that has to carry a lot of sass and a lot of attitude, and she's got to go on this big arc where we start to see through the layers and really start to care for her. It's just like it was in the video game. At first, she's kind of mouthy and she knows everything. She's always swearing, and Bella Ramsey does a good job with all the swearing and stuff. But we don't really fall in love with Ellie as a character until later on in the game, and that's true with the show, and especially true if you play Last of Us Part 2. And so there's a real potential here for Bella Ramsey to take massive ownership of this role, but it's hard to separate Ashley Johnson's work and that character model that we recognize from the game from Bella Ramsey's portrayal. The tone is about the same, but it just feels a little bit different. Pedro Pascal, on the other hand, he's got the stoic, never hesitating ferocity of Joel just down. It's a variation on what he's been playing in The Mandalorian, although, he doesn't have to wear a helmet this time, so we see it on his face. But we see the pain and we see the strength and the echoes of all of his life choices. This is truly a spotlight series for Pedro Pascal. He's excellent in this. But the other cast members are also fantastic in this. I loved Anna Torv as Tess, and Bill, played by Nick Offerman, is just perfect casting. And then lots of other really interesting character choices are sprinkled in there. And of course, we see Troy Baker pop up in the show, which was a great surprise. And we see Ashley Johnson in here in an unforgettable role, and she's terrific. And Jeffrey Pierce is also wonderful in the show, and I thought that Gabriel Luna is just an excellent choice for Tommy, Joel's brother. So I was incredibly happy with the series. I did miss some of the palpable, in the boots vibe that you get when you're playing The Last of Us, and how moment to moment in the game, you're always like wiping your brow thinking, how the hell can I survive this? Or how did I just survive that? There's a little bit less of that. It's scaled down. We're not going to see that vast amount of infected sort of swarming our heroes, or that vast amount of scumbag humans out to get Joel and Ellie. It's not quite the same. Everything is scaled to a more approachable realism. Having come to this from the game, it did feel like, whoa, they trimmed down some of the heightened escapism that you could experience in the video game. And the other thing that I was thinking of, and I think everybody that's reviewing this or watching this show is thinking about The Walking Dead as well, because it was such a juggernaut moment in popular culture. And I think there's been this kind of dismissive attitude around The Walking Dead. I've been hearing buzz that The Last of Us is kind of like the grown-up version of The Walking Dead, and I think people are being a little forgetful of how powerful those early seasons of The Walking Dead were. Sure, it's overstayed its welcome, but that was an incredible show. And so I don't know how I place this in context with The Walking Dead. I do know how I place this in context to my experience with this story playing the games. I think the game is better. I think playing the game is better, but I recognize that that's not going to be the taste and the choice for everyone out there. This is still a superb adaptation with so much cool creative risk-taking. So yes, I absolutely suggest that you take the journey and watch The Last of Us on HBO or Crave. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.